Everyone is changing strategy, and that includes Sony. In what can only be described as potentially one of the most emotional weeks in Xbox history, where yesterday we learned about studios being closed, games being turned off, or whatever, shut down. Today, we're learning about Sony is dabbling in a strategy that may sound very familiar. So the news out today is that Sony is bringing a title over to Xbox Series X and S on August 26th. Now, this title is Helldivers 2. This is pretty significant. For a while, we would always sort of assume that Sony would never do this sort of thing. And then something happened, and it's called money. And I think Sony is starting to realize that, yeah, Microsoft's strategy of doing all these titles on different platforms might be sort of not feeling great in the core entity of the gamer base. But the reality is, like, it's working, and Microsoft is making more money. And if you go look at the sales charts for what's happening over on PlayStation, who's usually at the top each month now? It's Microsoft. And they've got to be looking at going, well, maybe there's something to this. And this is a big deviation for the entire gaming industry. I would say for Xbox fans, but I think for everybody. So here's the deal. Helldivers 2 is coming to Xbox Series X and S, by the way. Now, it's not coming to last gen, so this is, one of those technically next gen titles, or I should say current gen titles is the only way to think about it, on August 26th, and you'll be able to dive into the full experience. Obviously, it is not coming to Game Pass. I think pigs will fly when there's a Sony PlayStation produced title that is into Game Pass, but again, I don't think these things are unreasonable to think that would happen in the future, because at the end of the day, money talks, and if Microsoft's willing to pay for it, Sony's probably willing to accept it. So this will cost you $39.99 or $59.99. Now, one interesting thing is this is happening on the same day as the Gears release over on PlayStation and on Xbox as well, for that matter, the remake. So there's a little bit of like hand swapping going on here. I don't know if the dates were intentional, but either way, the exclusives I think we can officially say are dead, at least when it comes to Sony and Xbox. Now, Sony's still holding on to certain titles. Like, this isn't a a PlayStation, a Spider-Man, if I could enunciate correctly, landing on the native Xbox console. But we already know that with the upcoming Xbox app and everything else going on, you might be able to actually play PlayStation games more directly on this is an Xbox hardware, if you will, not the traditional consoles. But this is a change. Now, this strategy is very similar to actually what Microsoft did. Remember Sea of Thieves? Right? Remember, Helldivers 2 is a live action or live service title. So is Sea of Thieves. This is one of those things where you need a large population of gamers to make the experience make sense. And so by doing this, they're going to refill the pool with kids wanting to play. Myself being a kid, not calling anybody my age a kid, but it's going to refill the population and bring more excitement and more players to the title, which is a huge win for PlayStation, keeping this title vibrant and relative through the later stages of the life cycle of a game like this, because that's hard to do, right? You can look at what Destiny has done. Everybody tries to recreate that experience, or like that longevity, I should say. But by doing this, they're going to increase that population base, and it's going to give new life into this title. So it's a big change. Now, the real question is everyone's going to be leaning in saying, but Brad, what other Sony titles are going to be coming directly to PlayStation like this? Now, we don't know yet. I think some of it, this is going to be another one of those canary moments where if this title does exceptionally well, Sony is not going to be dumb and be like, well, we made a whole bunch of money doing this title. We probably shouldn't do any more. They absolutely would. Now, Microsoft was a little bit more brash, if you will say. They're like, well, we're going to try this, and then if it works out well, like they already had so many titles lined up already to be ported over to PlayStation that it was more of like, yeah, we're saying this, but we're absolutely going to do it. Sony has not at least publicly indicated that if this does really well, would they bring more titles over, but we all know how the world works. And if this title starts generating them decent money and they see the effort worth the risk, then I think we would see more titles. I mean, the reality is, I've talked about this many different times. First off, console generations are basically dead. While this one is a little bit of an outlier where it doesn't support Xbox One, we know that there's a real blurry line between what is a generation anymore. And I think we're starting to see what a really blurry line is, like what is an exclusive. Timed exclusives seem to be more relevant these days, excluding Nintendo, because even titles like this, I can go play it on a PC. So that's not an exclusive. The exclusive concept anymore has evolved so much that it's not even really what it was, unless, again, you are Nintendo. So this is something to pay very close attention to. So what will happen is the title will launch, and then we need to see, hey, does this look like it's being received well? Is it go off without a hitch? I'm also curious, like, what about PlayStation login? I can't imagine there's going to be trophies, but are there achievements? I think there have to be achievements, right? There should be, because that's how Xbox works. And so here we are. The gaming industry is changing so fast right in front of our eyes. You have the Microsoft news, now you have this PlayStation news, you have just an evolving industry that is trying to justify these massive budgets that come with shipping a modern live service title, which is hard to do. We've seen many failures along the way, Anthem being one of the most notable over the years, but there are many more in its wake. So this is something that I did not have on my radar, candidly. I thought this was going to be mostly an Xbox-centric week. Sony was just going to try to stay out of the limelight, but clearly they had this lined up. Clearly Microsoft knew this as well. It makes you kind of wonder, it's like, ooh, we could announce the bad news on Monday or Tuesday, whatever, Wednesday. I can't even get my day straight. And then we'll have good news on Thursday. And, you know, give Microsoft some credit if they truly did do that to try to, like, soften the blow. Because while this is not going to calm the fears of, you know, the massive reorganization that just happened 24 hours ago, for some gamers, it's going to make a big difference that Xbox isn't just this locked ecosystem of games and they'll never see something beyond those horizons, because this title is going to be a big one. This is a very popular title over on the PlayStation side and the PC side for that matter. And I'm excited to see how this happens. Now, the question is, like, what other titles would they bring over? I think it's a little too early to speculate. Now, I would have to think, like, there's two parts of this that really make me want to understand the concept a little bit deeper. Porting games across platforms is, people think you just hit a button and it ports and it maps it. Like, it's work, right? It is genuine work, and it takes effort, and it takes a conceited effort or concentrated effort to get that done. This could, again, be one of the first major titles that is leading the way for more titles to follow, knowing that they've learned how to do it more effectively at this point. Will that shake out? I think sales will be the ultimate sort of thing, because obviously now PlayStation has an understanding, and the developers and everybody else behind this, how much actually costs to port a big title like this. And then if the big title can support it and the big title brings in the revenue, then you can take risks on smaller titles that will bring in smaller amounts of revenue and have smaller overhead, but it's still a cost, right? The goal here for Sony, by all means, is to make more money. And if they can do that and they can prove the business model works, which Microsoft has already done, then they will continue to do so. Now, the one challenge here is that we already know that there's more PlayStation gamers than there are Xbox. So when Microsoft goes over to PlayStation, there's a much larger pool and much higher revenue expectations. When PlayStation comes over to Xbox, it's obviously going to be smaller, but there are tens of millions of consoles, and if you can sell a good percentage of them with your big popular titles, you should come out ahead. So this is super interesting to me. The gaming industry is evolving so quickly, so rapidly, that you might as well keep it subscribed here, because on the BS on this channel is me.